Like many Northerners, the landscape architect and travel writer Frederick Law Olmsted opposed slavery less because of its impact on African Americans than because he thought it corrupted the white population of the South, including whites who didn't own slaves. But there was one Southern white population that impressed him tremendously, as seen in these excerpts from his 1857 book, A Journey Through Texas, or A Saddle Trip on the Southwestern Frontier. Visiting Texan settlements like New Braunfels and the surrounding area, Olmsted was blown away by German efficiency, not at making the trains run on time since railroads hadn't yet made it to the area, but at picking cotton. The first German settlers we saw, we knew at once. They lived in little log cabins and had enclosures of 10 acres of land about them. The cabins were very simple and cheap habitations, but there were many little conveniences about them and a care to secure comfort in small ways evident that was very agreeable to notice. So also the greater variety of the crops which had been grown upon their allotments, and the more clean and complete tillage they had received contrasted favorably with the patches of corn stubble overgrown with crabgrass, which are usually the only gardens to be seen adjoining the cabins of the poor whites and slaves. The people themselves were also to be seen, men, women, and children, busy at some work, and yet not so busy but that they could give a pleasant and respectful greeting to the passing traveler. A few miles further on, we passed several much more comfortable houses, boarded over, and a good deal like the smaller class of farmhouses in New England, but some of them having exterior plaster work or brick laid up between the timbers instead of boards nailed over them. About these were larger enclosures from which extensive crops of corn had been taken, and it caused us a sensation to see a number of parallelograms of cotton, free labor cotton. These were not often of more than an acre in extent. Most of them looked as if they had been judiciously cultivated and had yielded a fine crop, differing, however, from that we had noticed on the plantations the day before in this circumstance. The picking had been entirely completed, and that with care and exactness, so that none of the cotton which the labor of cultivation had produced had been left to waste. The cotton stalks stood rather more closely and were of less extraordinary size, but much more even or regular in their growth than on the plantations. In the town, each house has its garden plot, and over the neighborhood are scattered hundreds of small farms. Owing to the low price of corn, most of these had been cultivated partly in cotton during the year before our visit. The result was a total crop of 800 bales, which at Galveston brought from 1 to 2 cents a pound more than that produced by slaves, owing to the more careful handling of white and personally interested labor. But the expense of hauling cotton to the coast prevents any large profits at this distance. A railroad or a local manufactory must precede any extensive cultivation of cotton, while corn, which requires much less labor, can find a market at a fair price. With water power and hands upon the spot, it certainly seems an unnatural waste of labor to carry the staple to Massachusetts to be spun, but such, for want of local capital, is now the course of trade. In spite of the common assertion that only blacks can endure the heat of Southern labor, the production of cotton by whites alone is by no means rare. There are very many, both of those who work their own small cotton farms and of those who work with their few Negroes day after day in the field. Corn cultivation, for year after year, is the common work of the less vagabond of the poor whites. But there is hardly in the South another as striking an instance of pure free labor upon cotton fields as this of the Germans. Their cotton goes in one body to market, entirely separate from the great mass exported, and from their peculiar style of settlement, it may even be considered as the product of one large plantation, worked by white hands and divided into well-marked annual tasks. These 800 bales, therefore, though but a drop in the bucket to the whole crop, are a very substantial evidence of the possibilities of not only white, but of well-regulated free labor in the South. In their groundbreaking study of the economics of the American slave system, Robert William Fogel and Stanley L. Engerman unpacked the strengths and weaknesses of Olmsted's analysis. That Olmsted fully accepted the racial views of the day is clearly evident in his books. The Germans appear as the only whites in the South capable of resisting the degrading effects of slavery on white labor. They are invariably portrayed as industrious and efficient, the very models of enterprising, thrifty, and ambitious small proprietors. On the other hand, The only Jews that Olmsted encountered in the South were moneylenders of no character who charged extortionate interest rates, often not less than 25% per annum, who lived in squalid homes and who engaged in unlawful trade with the simple Negroes. Similarly, the Irish were dumb paddies who easily succumbed to the degrading Southern attitude toward labor and usually fell to a level that made their labor even less desirable than that of slaves. Olmsted's Northern chauvinism came to the fore whenever he compared the quality of Northern and Southern laborers. Few Northern employers would have recognized their employees from his description of them. Northern workers were almost invariably portrayed as highly motivated, diligent, self-propelled, and polite, even when being fired for some infraction of their normally high standards of behavior. There can be little doubt that Olmsted's jaundiced views of black relative to white labor and of Southern relative to Northern white labor were influenced by the racial presuppositions that he brought with him on his travels through the South. But to leave the matter there is to grossly oversimplify the issue. Olmsted was an extremely keen and diligent observer who was striving to discover those characteristics which distinguished the system of slave labor and which differentiated it from the system of free labor. While his prejudices undoubtedly predisposed him toward misinterpreting what he in fact observed or had reported to him, it is not likely that he would have fallen into these errors if there had not been mitigating circumstances that made his misinterpretations plausible, if there had not been substantial elements which lent support, or at least appeared to lend support, to his conclusions. As always, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already, hit that like button, share this video with anyone who might be interested, and I appreciate your watching and look forward to seeing you in the next video.